Yo, 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 what's up, y'all? You are listening to the Lazarus Affect podcast, and I am your host, Lazarus Ross. Let's grow. Let's go. Ahoo! One I consider kinfolk. He's one of my boys. He's one of my brothers. And it's an honor to have him on my show because Zack, frankly, has been one of the people in my life over this last three and a half years of my personal growth journey that has been very close to me and shared things with me and supported me in my journey. And as I would love to share Zack with everyone who doesn't know him, who's in my audience, so you can get a taste of why I love this man so much. And just from hearing him and seeing him yourself. Okay. So Zack, share with people your story.
Sure. Yeah, let's start. You go with the story. So let me share, I guess, my let's call it the awakening story.
There you go.
Or who I was prior to who I am now, right? So I was 14 growing up, and I grew up in a upper middle class white American family. You know what I mean? I had everything that I could want. I was, kind of entitled in that way, in my own way. I think we all are in some way as children. We're not really aware of what the reality of being an adult is, but I was privileged enough to have, all the modern computers and televisions and a nice car and all these things. So with that, came some privileges that my parents weren't really ready to understand the effect of me having these things, and really didn't even understand, what was going to happen with the birth of, high-speed internet, right? So it was the year 2000. We had just moved from dial-up internet, AOL, to broadband, and with that was a flood of internet pornography. So me as a 14-year-old boy, curious, horny, and I had been told to not watch it. And, if you tell a human being, especially a teenager, you can't do something, it instantly sparks their curiosity. You're infringing on free will. So that curiosity led me into starting to watch porn. Now, at the time, I didn't know that choice was going to lead me to a 16-year pornography addiction. But, no one really knew the dangers of internet pornography, specifically video pornography. Matter of fact, they didn't really start coming out with studies until about 2008, 2009 that showed the difference between still imagery and video pornography. And the difference is that video pornography will rewire your brain 10 times faster than still imagery. So this access, again, just me being a teenager, as I was in high school, I obviously was being monitored by my parents, so I would do it when I could get away with it. It's hard to remember at this time, but I was probably watching it 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Didn't have access to smartphones at the time. Like smartphones didn't come out to 2006, I think, or something like that. So it's not like I could watch it on a phone, but like I said, we had all the modern stuff, right? So by the time I got into college, I had my own laptop and I was alone a lot, and I was with roommates. So I stepped into my own autonomy, not prepared for what that really meant. And then that's when really the addiction got bad, right? So I was probably watching it sometimes 3 to 4 times a day, masturbating to it. And also, I would tell my roommates that I was studying all day. And I like to say that I was too smart for my own good because it really didn't impede on my education. I got a 3.1 with my bachelor's, really not trying. And I don't mean this from an arrogant space. I mean it from, this is just the gift that I was given. Yeah. And then I got a 3.9 with my master's, and, I was still deep in addiction. So that's why I say too smart for my own good, right? It was this isn't affecting my grades. This isn't affecting, but in a lot of ways it was. It still was a limitation to what I could be. And really where it started to show up was my relationship with women. I had a girlfriend in college, and I started to experience some of the more harmful effects, or I guess you could say even hurtful effects in a sense of what pornography use does. And One of those was experiencing porn-induced erectile dysfunction in my early 20s. So this is actually where you end up remapping your sexual attraction to pornography, which is this imagery on a screen, which ultimately you're attracting your sexual attraction to a screen. And I wasn't able to perform with women. And that was really heartbreaking at the time. I went through a lot of self-deprecation and also embarrassment and shame, because I was around a lot of men that, whether I knew it or not, what we talked about was, having sex with girls, and pornography was normalized. It's been normalized by society that it wasn't a big deal.
It was,
So I got to play around. And when I say play around, I mean, like, I was putting on a front. It's like, I love doing this. It doesn't bother me, but, really behind the scenes, I'm suffering. So I picked up marijuana in college and started smoking that. I also had my first mushroom experience in college, but that's not really relevant to right now. But started dabbling more drugs, as I got older. That relationship ended from college, and then I met my ex-wife, Celinda. And, for the first year that we were together, I didn't watch pornography that much. I actually, to myself, was believing that she had healed me in some sort of way. And that's impossible. But at the time, I don't know the difference. So after a year, again, things started getting, normal. I guess you could say in a relationship, the honeymoon phase is over. So then I started diving back into porn and experiencing the same things, and my ex-wife was a very sexual woman, and, I wasn't able to please her there. I was even taking Viagra and Cialis at this point, and still wasn't able to get an erection. And sometimes I was like 50% on. But even to try and get an erection, I was visualizing mental imagery of pornography, right? And I was using that imagery to get an erection. I was also using that imagery to orgasm with my ex-wife.
Yeah.
And she would actually tell me after sex, she was like, hey, like, I would be so proud of myself because it's like how it worked. And like, I orgasmed, and she would just tell me, she was like, I don't feel you. I don't think I don't notice whether you're present with me or not. I can't feel you with me.
Really? Dang.
Yeah. So that relationship, had a lot of fireworks in it, but, things start going south, and I get into harder drugs like, cocaine and MDMA. And I like to say that I kind of made myself bipolar through drugs. I was doing all these drugs on the weekend to feel good, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I was crying on the couch. And then back to the drugs on the weekend. It was really a vicious cycle. So eventually that led to, we got married, and I think after like a month after getting married, she looked at me and she said, I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't love you anymore.
Dang, it was only a month.
Yeah. So it was 3 months, 3 years of being together, right? But it was just like right after we got married, and then we struggled for about a couple of years, back and forth, before I finally, was forced out. It was forced out by my ex-wife. She found porn on my phone, and it was actually a couple of the most painful experiences of my life that I'd love to dive into, but I'm kind of doing an overview.
Yeah.
So all that to be said, it brought me to an awakening point where she left me. I came out about my addiction to porn and drugs, and had a divorce. And that was like when I had my first awakening in my life to realize that either I was going to end my life because I couldn't live like that anymore, or I was going to change. And I'm grateful at the time that I chose to change and start moving into self-exploration and spirituality and everything that I've moved into now.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So what was the deepest inspiration for you to support other people with this? I know you had already been in the fitness industry before, and you were coaching people and doing that, but now you still you have a program you run with your girlfriend that has fitness attached to it, but your primary thing has not been fitness for a while.
Yeah.
What was your deepest inspiration to lean into that?
Well, interestingly enough, I started wanting to help guys in this way in 2022, early 2022. And I felt the calling, and I started, and I was helping men. And then about 4 or 5 months in, I kind of tore it down. And my ego had a label in its head that I didn't like, and that was that I didn't want to be the porn guy. That I had these ideas of grandeur of being more than just the guy that is the porn guy that talks about porn and helps other guys, get porn addiction, right? So I moved away from it. But as I moved away from it, I was still coaching some entrepreneurs and CEOs, and majority of them were men. And I would say that probably 60 to 70% of them struggle with porn. So I like to say that porn addiction doesn't have some socioeconomic status to it. Like it literally is something that guys that are making millions of dollars are struggling with, and guys that are struggling financially struggle with. It's the easiest and also the most addictive way to escape reality, especially for men. So once I started helping men in that way, and I realized, oh, this is still a problem here. And I started to also look at the way that addiction recovery is currently framed with like the 12-step process. And I was starting to be able to see some faulty areas in it. And I don't say that it's wrong, but I say it's faulty. For instance, like if you had a door hinge and it wasn't working on a door, you wouldn't say the door was wrong. You would say it was faulty, right? So I was just seeing that. I was like, okay, well, here's a couple of areas that I think really prolong the healing process. And then I put my theory back to test by focusing in back with them. And to get all the way to this, man, the most inspirational part of this was when I was actually at an entrepreneur event in San Diego earlier this year, in March 2023. And I went out there to speak about, conscious leadership and self-awareness and self-mastery. And the two gentlemen in front of me both spoke about, what I was going to talk about in their own way. Like one of the guys was like a Joe Dispenza disciple, you know what I mean? And like I love Joe Dispenza. So a lot of the stuff that I use, because it's based off truth, is that.
Yeah.
So at that point, I just kind of dropped in my heart, and I was like, all right, well, you could go up there and you could talk about the same thing in your way, or you could share something. What do you want to share? And that's when I ended up sharing two of the most painful experiences of my life on stage. And as I was doing that, I kind of felt my heart open up, and my body was like vibrating, and I could see like this vision of where I could really start to make the most impact, which was in an area that most people don't touch, and also an area that I do believe to be kind of outdated in the healing principles that are being used in the 12-step process.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely, man.
So what would you say when a person is looking, what are the main principles that you adhere to when it comes to, and that you like to teach other people when it comes to being the creator of their own experience?
Yeah, so I'll actually marry these together with what I was talking about with the 12 steps too, right? So I've come to start calling truths experiential truths, and these are truths that are experienced by every human being on the planet. So truth has a good way of triggering people. But I would say that, truths that trigger people are based off of their own personal belief system, personal bias, right? Christians and Muslims, right? They believe each one is the truth, but they don't agree with each other. But experiential truth is something that every single human being experiences and can't be refuted. So the first two are that you're the observer of your thoughts, right? That we all as humans have the ability to observe our thoughts, and that we as humans also have the right to choose. It's our free will choice. So when you look at the first step of the 12-step process, and I'm going to paraphrase it, it basically says, hi, my name is Zach, and I am an addict, and that I am powerless against my addiction. And I understand the intention behind it, because the intention behind it is to move somebody into a form of acceptance. But to force somebody to accept is more the energy of admit. And admit isn't really acceptance, mainly because it's coming from a place of force. But also those are faulty principles. So one, my name is Zach, and there's no way that I could ever be an addict. I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the body is addicted to biochemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, right, inside of the addiction. But my nameless one, could never be addicted,
Doesn't have that.
right? So we're identifying with being an addict. And then secondly, I'm powerless against my addiction. That's not true.
Yeah.
I'm so powerful that I created my addiction because I chose it when I was 14 years old. Again, I didn't have the awareness to know what it was going to do, but ultimately I chose it.
Right.
So by just leaning on those two alone and starting the men off where I start them off with, instead of saying, hey, you're not powerless, you're so powerful, it really does rapidly start the healing process because they're willing to accept, one, that they are that powerful, which ultimately means that they can change their thoughts, they can change their reality through that process, and two, not identifying as an addict disconnects the identity loop of the behavior that can be addictive. If I said I am an addict, right, then I could stop watching porn, but then maybe I'll start being addicted to something else like nicotine or alcohol or drugs or something. But if I completely denounce that, no, my body is addicted, it creates that level of separation to be able to realize that this is something that is changeable and can be done very quickly, actually.
Yeah, like a car that we drive can be addicted to needing fuel in the tank or oil in the engine to run.
Yeah. It needs it to. It needs it to
It's
go.
not us.
Yeah.
What's next?
So with more truth, I get to go to
More
wholeness.
truth, more experiential truth.
Yeah. So
That's
one
what
of the things.
that's what we're here
Yeah.
talking about. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So the next one I enjoy is working through polarity. So one of the experiential truths is that wholeness is experienced in duality, meaning that when we can detach from our thoughts into the observer, and then we realize that we have a choice. We realize that we're choosing between two parts of ourselves, that we have the shadow side and we have the light side. And the shadow side isn't necessarily evil. Our shadow side is actually not authentically ours. And what I mean by that is that your shadow is just your program, and your program is built by, your societal conditioning. Environmental conditioning, I guess, is the best way to describe it, which that can be your parents' beliefs, your teachers, your the society that you grew up in, like the American society, things like that, right? So actually the shadow side is just your programming. And ultimately the voice in your head from that side of you, most likely is your parents' voice. It's not even your voice, right? You just took that on. Mm-hmm. And then the light side is the authentic side of you, but it's typically the side that is scary. It's the unknown, right? But it's also the side of you that is where your power's at. So when I'm working with anybody through addiction or behavioral shifts, right? We can say addiction or a behavioral shift. It's the same process.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. We go into the shadow. We find out where you are unaware of choices that you're making that are creating an effect in your life that you are not happy with, a behavior or emotion. Then we find the antithesis. Like if you're a liar, like a lot of addicts are and were, like, hey, I was a liar, then my antithesis means I'm honest. So now let's start looking at all the different areas in your shadow that you're lying, that you're being dishonest, and realize that the choice here is honesty, and that's actually your light. Just most are afraid to be honest, right? Because being dishonest has protected them from being seen, even though what it's protecting is their own suffering through the process. So that's I really love teaching polarity. We were at the event or Know Your Power retreat this past weekend, and that was the theme, was polarity. Because once people start to become aware that they are both, right, and they find their wholeness and they find their power because they can choose through all the different desires that they have and find out what aligns to the light side of who they are. And ultimately, that's the pathway to self-awareness, and then eventually self-mastery, and then eventually ascension into a higher plane of consciousness.
So you touched on something about people being able to accept their desires and accept these things and live in alignment with them. And what is one thing that keeps people from being able to do that?
Well, fear. Fear is the number one thing. And typically it's fear of judgment, and typically it's judgment based off of what is normal compared to what they believe to be weird or strange, whatever else. I'll grab some water real quick.
Good.
Clear the throat out. The other thing that really pops up for that as well is not only fear of judgment, but also fear of the unknown, right? That's the main one that we get into, that mystery state, which is like, hey, if I follow this desire, which is at odds with my current reality that I'm comfortable in, what is going to shift in my reality that I don't want to let go of, right? Because ultimately, when we bring something new forth from within and start to experience it, we also go through the cycle of the principle of rhythm. Something has to fall off for something to grow, right? So there's that fear as well. So fear of the unknown, fear of judgment, especially, the guys that I work with, there's a lot of taboo around porn, right? And some of the guys that I work with ultimately are also hiding, like maybe that they're bisexual, right? And then they're using pornography as a way to explore their bisexuality, but they haven't brought that into reality with who they are. And they might have a girlfriend, might have a wife, right? So, there's a lot of fear around like, well, whether this is or isn't something that I want to explore. And ultimately, you'll know is that if this desire continues to pop up for you and you keep suppressing it, and the more you suppress it, the more you're dissatisfied with your life, it's because that's actually something that's a part of who you authentically are. And you're suppressing a part of you that needs to be experienced. And once you can experience it, then you can actually decide whether it's something you want to integrate and keep or leave behind.
Nice. What's next?
Yeah. So another one that I enjoy, when it comes to the truth is there are no accidents. That's something that, me and you both look at in a sense of understanding that nothing can be accidental. Everything is by divine design. And then through that aspect of it, this is really healing for a lot of people when it comes to regret, right? And also just not living in reality of what actually occurred, which ultimately is what regret is. So when we say, I shoulda, I woulda, I coulda, right? These are places where we feel like we should have shown up differently than what we did. But by doing that, it creates the suffering of self-deprecation. Like you just sit in it and say, well, I could have been better there. But it takes away from sitting in the reality of the fact that you did what you did. And interestingly enough, what I find with regret is that when you say like, hey, I should have shown up differently there, how you should have shown up differently is actually the direction of how you would want to show up in the future, because it's like the lesson is there, but you're not integrating the lesson in reality. So whenever that situation comes again, the lesson is still like in the ether of the I should have. And then that experience comes forward and you haven't brought that you haven't integrated that lesson into the awareness of reality. So then it happens again. And then you end up showing up in the same way you did. You react in the same way you did in the past. And then you just have the same regret. Oh, that was another opportunity. I should have shown up this way.
Because and then you're still not in integrity with, and the trying to hide from the shame keeps you being out of integrity. You're out of integrity, and then it'll keep going.
Yeah. It's like there's two planes, right? There's reality, and then there is the illusion, which is where you're at, and the experience is happening in between it. But you don't want to integrate, that I should have into your reality, because you can't accept that that's how you showed up. So, we first have to accept that that's how we showed up. Once we can accept, okay, this is what I did. And then I can sit there and say, okay, you really have to contemplate on what happened in that situation to be able to get a handle of it. Like, let's say you got triggered by somebody else and you got angry, right? And then after that being angry, you're like, man, I shouldn't have got angry there. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't deserve that, or she didn't deserve that, or whatever else. Well, by staying in the regret, you don't sit in the reality. Well, the reality is, okay, I got triggered there. Well, what triggered me, right? Why did I get triggered there? And it could be, well, I got triggered there because, she said, or he or she said something to me that I judged myself for. Okay, well, now you've come into an awareness. Okay, I judge myself for being, let's just say, insecure. Many times, triggers are insecure. So I'm insecure about this one thing. Okay, now I know that. So now that I know that, now I can bring the I should have into that lesson. Okay, the next time somebody shows up and they say something that's aligned with that insecurity, I have the awareness. And now I'm going to show up in a way that is not angry, because ultimately this is just a part of me that's not healed just yet, right? And that gives the opportunity to do so.
Real quick wave.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
So what are all the projects that you're working on currently?
Yeah, dude. So got a few things going on. Have my podcast that I'm going to be coming out with. It's
Nice.
gonna be called Divine Dichotomy. So I'm big on
Oh,
polarity right now.
let's go.
So
That's
that one's
great.
going to be coming out, and I've really been missing an outlet for my own voice.
Hmm.
Um, I took this year to. It's been wild, man. Just a lot of letting go, a lot of expansion and contraction,
Yeah.
and I took a lot of time to really start figuring out some patterns that were in my life of jumping at the next thing without really checking in. And I
Yeah.
realized I was coming from a place of scarcity, right? I was
Yeah.
like, man, I gotta make money, so I'm gonna show this out, I'm gonna throw this out, I'm gonna throw this out. And what's been really nice is, the joining with Julia with the Know Your Power community is created a nice little financial blanket in a sense of me not trying to make money with what I'm doing. And that's been really, really helpful. So we have the Know Your Power community. It's a women's empowerment community. We're doing transformation programs. We're building the community, which is really beautiful. We just had a
Mhm.
retreat this past weekend with lots of healing and also the empowerment with the women. So all that's happening. Getting the podcast started next month. Also working on a book. So I had an experience out in Vegas, actually at the Red Rocks. That was, let's call it a magical experience.
Hmm.
I've been informed by guides that I was going to be channeling something sometime soon, and I didn't know when it was. And ultimately, this experience was that. So I channeled, let's just say, my higher self is the best way to describe it, and was recording that at the time. So was able to take that recording, put in a transcript, and I'm going to put it together. It's going to be more like a memoir, which will be interesting. And then also just still, assisting men, right? And the porn addiction aspect of this. So there's a lot of things that have come up, but ultimately it's all aligned with the undertone of what I love to do. So I've learned to kind of release the attachment of who I'm serving or how I'm serving, and just realizing that service is the thing that really lights me up, right? So whatever that looks like, whatever form that comes in, I'm allowing that to be my guide with everything that I'm doing right now.
That's beautiful, brother. Thank you for sharing that. It's
Yeah.
having so the real niche is, what would you call it? Because I asked you this question because I want people to get it from how you see it, because I know the way that you see it is the way that I see it too.
Yeah, so the I guess you could say the niche or the niche is unity consciousness. It's oneness, which actually is funny because it's really not a niche. Uh,
Right.
but
It's just what is.
Yeah, but it is in a sense in our current environment, right? There are some that
Yeah.
are prescribing to it. There's some that are religious
Right.
and reject it. But even the ones that prescribe to it, there's still a lack of, from what I've seen, not everybody, right? I'm speaking in generalities. Like there's still a lack of connection with God
Hmm.
because I feel like there's a lot of religious trauma that keeps an individual from one self-actualizing to realization that they are God, little g God,
Right.
and then also not realizing that the main way that God communicates with us is through emotion, right? So emotion, energy, and motion, right? So like our main way that God communicates through us is the emotions that we experience.
Hmm.
And it's rare. I'm not going to say rare, but it's more rare to actually bring in channeled words or to have something speak to you or whatever else, because ultimately words are a poor form of communication.
Hmm.
So, if God is vibration, if God is this, right, in the sense of at the baseline loving vibration, then you can start to tune into what is out of alignment when you are not in love, right, in the loving vibration. And that's where emotions start to become signals rather than something that you attach to. right? So a heavier feeling in my stomach of shame or guilt is just a signal to allow me to observe and to realize that, okay, this is a part of me that's out of alignment with my natural state of love. And what are the stories? What are the experiences? And how can I shift my own perceptions, right, to align with that? But yeah, that's what I would say, man, is that oneness is this. And that's what I'm doing when I'm taking these other niches like porn addiction or women. That's what I'm teaching. And I'm teaching them these principles without, throwing it in their face that, hey, you're God pretending to be human. That's not what I'm doing. It's rather allowing them to experience themselves as God or the divine.
Thank you for sharing that, brother. How can people find you? They want to connect with you.
So you can find me on Instagram at Zack Blakeney. Luckily, nobody has my name, so you can pretty much find it everywhere. ZackBlakeney. If you're a man and that you are struggling with porn, and it's something that you would like to become free of, you can check me out. iambornfree.net/get-free-today. And also, if you go to my Instagram or really any of my social medias, I have some free trainings. I have a quiz. So if you're uncertain about whether or not it's really a problem for you in your life, there's some easy tools for you to find out that maybe what you're feeling is true. And that's really where you can find me right now.
Thank you, brother. I'll make sure all of that is in the description. Y'all want to connect with Zack? I highly recommend it. Check him out. That's the homie. Love you, brother. Thanks for coming.
Love you, Laz. Again, thanks a lot for having me on, brother.
Absolutely.
Find out that maybe what you're feeling is true. And that's really where you can find me right now.
Thank you, brother. I'll make sure all of that is in the description. Y'all want to connect with Zack? I highly recommend it. Check him out. That's the homie. Love you, brother. Thanks for coming.
Love you, Laz. Again, thanks a lot for having me on, brother.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you coming through and listening to the podcast. If you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and do that. And if you know somebody else this podcast can help, share it with them. Let's go. Let's grow. Aua.